Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Welcome to our 61st installment of the Torah portion of the week. We're holding by Parshas Vayishlach. Parshas Vayishlach speaks about Esav's confrontation with Yaakov and the story of Dina and being taken by Shem, and that's what I really want to focus on. So, if you take a look at Genesis chapter 32, verse 23. In verse 23, it says, "But he got up that night, took his 2 wives, 2 handmaids, his 11 sons, and they crossed the ford of the Yabok. And when he took them and had them cross over the stream, he sent over his possessions." So it says over here that he got up and he went with his wives, his kids, right, his handmaids, his 11 sons. Right, with his 11 sons, says the Medrash. The Medrash, as Rashi explains, says, where was Dina? Right, it says 11 sons, doesn't mention Dina. So where was Dina? Dina was locked up, the Medrash says. She was locked up that Esav wouldn't see her. And, because if Esav saw her, maybe he'd want to marry her, or whatever the case is. And Yaakov is punished because he prevented Dina from potentially going to Esav and trying to get him to do tshuva. And therefore, what happens right afterwards? Right afterwards, she gets taken in and abused, basically, by Shem. So there's an obvious question. There's an obvious question in the Medrash, and the question is, if Yaakov wants to hide his daughter, so his brother won't have any influence over her, which, she doesn't have to marry him for any reason. Wouldn't be a good match anyway. So that being the case, why in the world should Yaakov be held accountable and Dina gets taken for that reason? Right? If Esav is going to be the one to set his eyes upon her, maybe she could have him do tshuva. Maybe she could work on him, and maybe he'll repent. So why didn't he do that? I mean, he didn't have to. There was no question, but he's taking a task. He's taking a task for that. So says Moed Rabbi Arav Agon Ramosh Sternbach Shlita, brings down in Chochma Vadaz that what was Esav? Esav was a lot of things. One thing he was he trapped women. Right? He was able to cajole them, convince them to be with him, etc. Just like someone, tries to trap fish, tries to hunt, so to speak. So that's what he did. He hunted women, to convince them to be with him. Whatever the case was. But the women, when they went to him, they weren't forced. Right? He had a tremendous, I guess for lack of a better word, he had tremendous charisma. Right? To be able to get these women to go with him, to be with him. Now we know that all the children of Yaakov are righteous, right? We see that at the end of the book of Genesis. Now they may have certain flaws, but they're all known to be righteous. Dina's no different. So if she's righteous, so what are we worried about over here? What was Yaakov really worried about? If she's truly righteous, she's going to see right through this faker, right? This flatterer. That's what we'll call him. We'll call him this great flatterer. So he's going to try and flatter and convince and cajole. She's not going to buy any of it, right? She's the daughter of Yaakov. Yaakov's emes represents truth. Why in the world is she going to be taken in by this, by this flatterer? So my Rabbi points out that the reality is he would have had an influence on her, so she should have tried to have an influence on him and try to get him to do tshuva. Try to get him to repent. So we see from here an interesting thing. Now, obviously, a person doesn't have to put himself in a bad situation. certainly be set up with a bad marriage partner and try and change the person. That's not what marriage is. Even when a person does get married for the right reasons, they're not there to change the other person. They have to work together, work things out, whatever issues they may have. But, one is not, not going to try and change the other. Because, if one tries to change the other, or both try to change, the other person, that's not going to be good. That's definitely not going to be good. So here it seems, as my Rabbi points out, this was a claim against Yaakov. Yaakov should have had more faith, should have believed in his daughter more, and that Esav wouldn't have had control over her, and he wouldn't have been able to flatter her. And not only that, she'd have an influence over him for the positive. So the fact that he hides him in a box, he hides her in a box, so Esav's not going to see her, is considered that he did something wrong, and he shouldn't have done it. And because of that, Dina is taken by Chaim, and she gets abused. So Rabbi also points out that's a direct connection. In other words, if Dina would have been allowed to try and have some positive influence over Esav, now whether she would have or not, it's a different issue, but she should have been allowed to. So because of that, the punishment is she falls in the hands of Shem. Because if she would have fallen, if she would have spoken to Esav, and she would have understood that he's absolutely evil, she would have stayed away from him like the plague. Right? She wouldn't have gone out. She wouldn't have gone out to see what's going on in the world. And therefore it wouldn't have been a problem. Right? Nothing would have happened. Right? Because what does it say? The Torah says afterwards she went out. Right? She was more, I guess, extroverted. She wanted to see what was going on. Go out to the world. Well, had she would have learned, what Esav was all about, she would have been better prepared. She would have been taken in. Well, that's not what happened. So again, she gets taken, seemingly by force, because Yaakov doesn't allow her to be seen by Esav. Now, it's interesting that in this case, and we can make it a more general case, and that is that if she would have gone to Esav, as my Rabbi mentioned before, she could have possibly had an influence, but she would have understood who he was. So that would have had a positive influence. Or it could have had a positive influence. Whether it would have not, is a different issue, but it certainly could have because of her righteousness. So now that asks the question, or begs the question, that, if a person wants to try and have influence over someone else, the question is, do they go out to them? Or do they have the people come to you? So, if you're on your own turf, they're coming to you, you have the upper hand. The reason you have the upper hand is because you're not going to foreign territory. You're not going to places where, a Jew shouldn't be. You worked on yourself. You learned for many years, this, that. The outer world has and can have negative influence. Doesn't mean you don't step outside your door. Right? Person has to work. You have to go to certain places. You might not want to go. You might be out of your comfort zone. but you have to guard yourself as much as you can. So people will say, and make a claim, that the ultra Orthodox, communities are very insular. Right? They don't go out to most places, which is true. Again, a person has to work, doesn't matter. You have to go where you need to go. But yes, the community is much more insular. Now that makes a lot of sense why that should be. Because you don't want these foreign influences to have an effect on us. So as people would say, well, what's the matter? You're weak in your resolve? If Torah is so strong and is so great as you claim, quote unquote, right, as you claim that is, then what's the problem? It must be that the Torah can't be that strong, otherwise secular world shouldn't have that influence. The answer is that's not true. If a person, has to be out in the world, so to speak, he has to know. He has to know what he needs to do. He has to know how to interact with others. He has to guard his eyes. He has to guard himself. Because it's tremendous impurity that's out in the world. People are exposed to it all the time. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. Right? Most certainly it's not a good thing. But we have to work on that evil inclination. So that's why we're more insular. We don't need to bring the street into our house. Our house doesn't need to be like the street. Our house should be a house of Torah. The first thing a person should see when they walk into a religious person's house is books. We are the people of the book. We learn. Right? There are thousands and tens of thousands of books written on the Torah, written on the Talmud. You got early commentators, later commentaries, philosophical books. There's plenty out there to learn. So if a person walks into someone's house and the first thing they see is a 60-inch plasma TV, then you know what's most important in that person's house. If on the other hand you walk into someone's house and you don't see a TV, all you see are books, so then you know what's most important. It's about learning. It's about values. It's about heritage. Right? It's not about the next game, the next movie, the next whatever. You fill in the blank. So the world at large, in general, is tremendously tempting. So a person out there, which is, no one lives in a cave today. We all have to be out there at some point. So, we have to work, guard ourselves. And again, this doesn't mean the Torah is weak. It means we are. It means we have a lot to work on. And as someone once said to me, if you walk on the beach, and you get excited, there's something wrong with you. Which I answered that if you walk on the beach and you don't, then you better go see a psychologist. Right? Because God gave us a tremendous urge. Just because someone becomes religious doesn't mean the urge goes away. It has to be harnessed, it has to be used properly. True. Right? But that is a natural inclination. We're not into suppressing things. We're into using them properly. Right? Everything in Christianity is bad. It's evil. It's bad, bad, bad. Torah says it's not bad. You have to know how to utilize it. Right? A person's married, can't be with your wife anytime you want. Got to have a relationship. Got to speak. It's not about flesh and blood. It's about guarding a relationship. So it's about harnessing something in a proper way. So too, we eat, we drink. Doesn't mean that we should be fat. We should be gluttonous. We should be alcoholics. You're allowed to eat and drink. Yeah, but you're not allowed to abuse things. Just because it's permitted doesn't mean I can abuse it. So this is a danger. This is exactly the danger of that world. That if a person's not prepared, you'll fall very fast. And if you are prepared, you gotta make barrier after barrier after barrier. Because at the end of the day, you let this in a little bit, it's going to take hold. It's just going to weaken you. That you don't want. That you're just setting yourself up for failure. Being part of the secular world, which everyone is, so we have to use it for what it is. Person, needs to support his family, needs to make livelihood. Person works in an office, in a building, whatever. Okay, that's what you have to do. It's not the ideal, that's the reality. So, when a person leaves his front door, he didn't leave his Judaism behind. It follows him wherever he goes. He's an ambassador for the Torah. Or maybe an embarrassment for the Torah, but at the end of the day, we should be an ambassador. People should look at a Torah Jew and say, oh, look how well behaved. Thank God his father, his rabbi, taught him Torah. That's what we should be saying. Then you got people that are crooks and do other things, gives us a bad name. Right? Gives Jews a bad name. So these type of things, you say, well, you just got to be stronger. There must be something wrong. So again, the secular world, in many ways, is tempting. There's a lot of temptation. Fantasy is what sells. Truth is a hard thing to sell. People that find the truth are lucky. Not an easy thing to find. But if you have it, so you got to fight to keep it. Not like the evil inclination's going to rest. You got to fight for it. It has to be that important. You'll do whatever it takes. So when a person leaves his house, does it mean kashrus goes out the window? Does it mean that he has to pray with the minyan, with the quorum? That goes out the window. All other mitzvahs go out the window. So what if he's got to be in a workforce? Can't work on Shabbos. Can't work on festivals. You got to find a job that's going to accommodate that. You want to live like a Jew, that's what you got to do. That's a priority. I had somebody once, the process of conversion, and said, I can't believe it. They made an appointment, and they didn't realize that appointment that they can't get out of is on the first day of Sukkot. So it was a good thing they were still a non-Jew, but they said, Rabbi, how could I have done it? I can't believe I made this appointment so far in advance. I didn't realize it was Sukkot. So I gave them a very, very good piece of advice. I said, go get a Jewish calendar. If you can't find one, go to a funeral parlor. They always have calendars, right? They always have Jewish calendars. And then next time you make an appointment, check the calendar. Are there any holidays during this time that I can't work on? I thought it was a great piece of advice. I said, yeah, but I can't believe I did that. Yeah, because you're not thinking like a Jew. If you really thought like a Jew, that's olive pays. You make an appointment in September, October, you got to make sure it doesn't fall out during any of the holidays. Oh, look at that. It came out of Rosh Hashanah. How could that happen? Buy a calendar. Life's about preparation. It's about doing everything we can in order that we strive to reach whatever potential we have. So anything that takes away from that is going to weaken us. It'll make like a chink in the armor. So say, what's the big deal? I see this, I do that. It just makes your resolve less strong. So it's a lifetime of work. No one said it's easy. Is it meaningful? Yeah, it's meaningful. Gives us a purpose? 100%. Do we have to work at it? Do we have to learn on a regular basis? We have to pray 3 times a day for all you men out there? Yes. but to see if a person really understood what they're doing. And they're really in tune with their spiritual side, then what they should be able to say, with total clarity, is that the outside world has absolutely zero to offer. Doesn't matter how fancy things look. Fantasy is good. Looks like a lot of fun. But it's fantasy. Not about life. Just about pushing away things and filling your time with other things that are meaningless. To say, wow, life is heavy. Yeah, it is. Every day is about life and death. We just don't see it that way, but that's what it is. And every day we get closer to the grave. Sorry to tell everyone that, but you're all going to die at some point. Then you're going to have to answer for what you did. That's going to be a hard thing to do. Because if God thought you had better potential and you wasted it, that's going to be bad. So, if a person thinks that they're going to let certain things in, they look the other way on other things and they think, oh, it's not going to affect me that much. Think again. Right, we'll tell a famous story, which I've told a number of times, but good stories always bear repeating. There's a famous story with the first Chabad rabbi, the Baal Tanya, one who wrote the book, the Tanya. He had a student, and the student was going off to university. So the Baal Tanya told him, you better be careful, because there's a lot of heretical things you can learn in university. So the student told him, he says, don't worry. He says, Rabbi, I was by you for many years. I didn't become such a tzaddik. I didn't become so righteous. If I go to university, I'm not going to be that bad either. Right? If you didn't have a positive influence on me, this is not going to give me a negative one. So the Baal Tanya said, you're making a big mistake. The reason you're making a big mistake is when impurity hits you and you touch it, you become impure automatically. Right? Just by touching it, you become impure. Righteousness, Torah, you want to have a good spiritual influence from what you learn and what you do. That takes work, takes effort. It's one of the three things that are hard to acquire. Because we have trials and tribulations all the time. You have to fight. You have to fight for it. And if you don't, you can just become weaker in your spiritual resolve. And that, according to everybody, is bad. Because you'll weaken. So the Baal Tanya said, you wanna bring this negative influence upon yourself, just by touching it, you become impure. In other words, it's not just making a chink in the armor. It's like opening it up with a hacksaw. The buzzsaw. So that it seeps straight in. We're getting closer to Hanukkah. That's what Hanukkah is all about. What do the Greeks want? Yeah, they made certain decrees against the Jews, but they flattered them. And they said, come be like us. Come to our gymnasiums. Come to our stadiums. Participate in the Olympics. In all these sporting events. What's the problem? And a lot of people got broken down. And the reason they got broken down is because over and over again they had this trial. So I said, okay, what's the big deal? So I'll go to their stadium. Once in a while I'll go to their stadium. But then what happens? You get addicted. It's a lot of fun. No one's saying the secular world is fun. It's not fun. There's plenty of fun out there. But again, and this people don't want to hear because they'd rather live in fantasy. They don't want to hear it's going to affect you negatively. And, if you want to do a test, the ultimate test will be whatever thing you're going to do. Before you do it, or you contemplate doing it, ask yourself the following question. Does this make me a better Jew or no-ide, right? If you want to be a no-ide and not convert, or as a Jew, is it helping me in my service to God or not? Some people say, Rabbi, I have to go to this game. I have to watch it religiously. I watch it religiously. Thank you very much. It's a disease. That's what it is. It's a disease for fantasy. And fantasy sells. You want to hear about hard work? You want to hear about, overcoming your evil inclination, striving to reach higher spiritual levels? I'm not talking about running around in the snow when it's 40 below in your shorts and a tank top, showing your aesthetics over here. We're talking about sanctifying this world. It takes a lot of effort. It's hard. But I like fantasy. Okay. Who doesn't like fantasy? When you give into that, however little you give into it, it has an effect. We won't see it straight away, but it has an effect. And the effect is negative. So because the effect is negative, which it will be, imagine going to the stadium. Can't even imagine how many good character traits you're going to see there. Not to mention all the great language that's going to be used and everything else. Okay, so now you know what the answer is. The answer is, that's bad for me. It's bad for my soul. Yeah, but other people are doing it. My friends are doing it. This, that. You got to be like Abraham. You got to go to the other side. Because at the end of the day, you're going to return your soul to God. And obviously, it's not going to be the same as it was because of all the transgressions that we do. But you want to try and minimize. Esav and Yaakov were the same. In the sense that, they grew up in Yitzhak's house. But he was even greater than Yaakov in learning. But desires killed him. Absolutely killed him. That's what can happen. So a person has to be careful. And again, as probably many know, I don't say things that are politically correct. This certainly is not going to be politically correct. And that is, these people are going to steer you away from Torah. And there are many out there. That want to lead me in that direction, in the wrong direction. What that's going to do is affect you negatively. It's inevitable. So then you're going to say, so I have to leave family and friends? That depends. It depends what it is. People will say family's family, nothing changes. Alright, so if you can be with family at certain times, there are not going to be any arguments or whatever. Okay. But if you know it's going to be a negative influence, so you have to make the choice. You absolutely have to make the choice. You might lose friends along the way. You might lose family along the way. Can't be with them at certain times. So a person has to be careful. But make no mistake, negative influence is what it is. And we have to guard against it. Even if they're siblings, even if they're parents. Right? A parent would say, and I've heard many tell me this, A parent will say, how can you not do what I say? Why can't you come to this non-kosher restaurant? Everyone's going to be there. You should also be there. Don't you have an obligation to honor your parents? Right? So the Torah says, no, not in that sense. Because if your parents tell you to break Torah, for instance, they tell you to break Shabbos, you don't have to listen to them. There's no obligation to listen to them. That is honoring them by not listening. Again, it can be heart-wrenching. People, may have to find other friends, more like-minded. But their influence is negative. The way they talk, the way they act. I mean, the list goes on. So if it's negative, we should really think, and we don't live this way, but we should really think something that's a negative influence, even if we think it may be negative, we should run away from it like the plague. Because we want to protect our souls. Do we do that? No. Because we're not in tune enough with ourselves. We're just not. We'll cut ourselves some slack. We'll cut other people some slack. Say it won't be so bad. This, that. But the reality is, it can be negative. And if it's negative, you're only going to have yourself to blame. When you get upstairs, God's going to say, didn't you hear that video? Didn't you watch it? Didn't you see what that rabbi said? And you didn't care. The ball game was more important. Family, quote unquote, was more important. What about me? God's going to say, what am I, chopped liver? You gave me lip service? It's going to look a lot worse. And again, we don't always make the right decision. We can answer things up in different ways. I'll have a more positive influence if I'm there, this, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, according to the evil inclination, they're gonna have the last laugh. Because they may certainly influence you worse than you possibly will influence them. Doesn't mean you can't influence them positively. But it has to be the right time. It has to be in your own turf, not on theirs. So again, it's a hard thing. It's definitely a hard thing. But you only get one shot in this world. And it looks like this is our last reincarnation. So you definitely have, this is the last shot. If it's the last shot, you better make the best of it. Kind of like, I mentioned when Esav sells the birthright. What does he sell it for? Seemingly he sells it for a bowl of lentils. So my Rabbi says, tongue in cheek, same thing with us. We give into our evil inclination. We sell a good portion of the next world for a bowl of lentils. Is it worth it? You say, boy, it was fun. But in spiritual terms, is it worth it? It's not worth it. We got to be strong. We have to live in this world that Torah is the ultimate. There's nothing more important. Everything else goes by the wayside. It's heavy. It should be. We're not looking for an easy way out. But you have to live in this world also. You have to know how to use downtime as well. But it's all about learning. It's all about, going to classes, trying to lift ourselves up to a higher spiritual level. That's what it's about. It's about sanctifying this world. It's about keeping the holidays, knowing what the holidays mean, learning about them, living them. God allowed fantasy to exist because he wanted you to have free choice. But in this generation, probably harder than most generations, each generation has their own things that they have to deal with. This generation is full of fantasy. You can have it right in the palm of your hand. It's funny. You got phones that have more memory, than the first computers. Right? Who remembers what a floppy disk is? Right? I remember, when I was in college, someone brought a Commodore 64. That was like, oh, it was a big thing. 64K. Woo! But we lose sight. We get distracted. So we think, oh, that's not going to affect me as negatively. Really? God says it's a negative thing. Don't do it. He knows better. But then you got people who want to straddle both worlds. Yeah, I'll learn. I'll keep Shabbos. But there are other things I can do in the world. Sporting events so bad. Watching a movie here and there is so bad. I want to enjoy a little bit. God says, is it a good thing? Are you getting closer to me now? Are you living the ideal with the way I set up the world? Or would you rather live in fantasy land? You can live in fantasy land. It's your choice. But realize, God says every choice, there are repercussions. What will be the repercussions here? You'll pay a price. Very serious price. That if we really saw it that vividly, then we'd live differently. We'd think differently. But we don't. Bottom line is we don't. So, we have to take this to heart. We have to think, what's really important in life. And what's really important in life is embellishing our soul to the extent that it draws closer to God. How do you do that? Through Torah, through mitzvahs, whether a Jew or non-Jew, whatever a non-Jew has to do for themselves. It's part of the Noahide laws. Or a Jew. You were born and put in this world to work. In physical terms, in spiritual terms. Now that being said, I have to know what's good for me, what's bad for me. Sometimes we just get sucked up in our in our bad character traits, in things that are bad for us. Then we get in a rut, and it becomes much harder to overcome, because then the evil inclination sort of exists and just keeps feeding and feeding and feeding on it. Doesn't allow you to break it. You got to work really, really hard to break it. Again, the impurity comes in, it sticks to you like glue. Boom, 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 it stays there. You want Torah to stick, you got to work like fire. And you got to keep doing, you got to be consistent. Whatever you do, you got to be consistent. Otherwise, it's never going to stick. That means you have to be around like-minded people, live in like-minded communities. That's why the Orthodox community is insular. We don't want these negative influences coming in, even though they do. We want to try and minimize them. Because at the end of the day, we're not interested in producing Hellenized Jews. We're interested in producing Torah scholars. We're interested in having our daughters marry Torah scholars or potential Torah scholars. What's more important than that? Zero. Otherwise, no Jewish continuity. You won't have it. It'll disappear. You want to be a Greek? Go be a Greek. Ain't much left of the Greeks today. Even though a lot of society does have some semblances of what the Greeks brought to the world, but they themselves have disappeared. And anyone who goes in that path, they also will disappear. As a Jew, you want to be part of the secular world, have a small portion of the Jewish world, you're finished. It might sound depressing, you're finished. Intermarriage up the gazoo. People know nothing about their own religion. 90% of world Jewry. How in the world are they going to survive without the Torah? They won't. Say, but I want to help them survive. Good luck. It's like drowning in the ocean. Someone says, save me, save me. So what happens? An anvil comes out from heaven, sinks you, bonks you right on the head. Boom! Go save yourself. Yeah, maybe you have somewhat influence on others that are much less than you. But they're going to drown also. So sometimes you got to look out for yourself, because if you don't, not only will you drown with them, but the repercussions are going to be much greater. God's going to say, you had much greater potential. You wanted to be a big fish and you were too weak to leave. I chatted with a number of people, and people have the struggle of leaving and moving and, going to a community. Yeah, there are a lot of unknowns. And it ain't easy. It's true. Definitely not easy. Financially, other reasons. But you have to ask yourself at the end of the day, what do I want for my wife and kids? Or my potential wife and kids? You want to be a statistic? You be a statistic. You want to be the real deal? Be part of the Jewish people to be able to pass something down to the next generation? You can do that. You want fantasy? You can do that also. But see, at the end of the day, what does fantasy do? Kind of reminds me, I lived in New York, and I had this roach motel. Right? I had this thing to trap roaches. And I saw this bug. It was so big. It was like dancing, doing the jitterbug. No pun intended. It was like doing the jitterbug, doing the Michael Jackson moonwalk on this roach motel. It was too big to get in. So I looked at it, he looked at me, I'm like, you're dancing on that? You deserve to live. So I didn't swat him. Let him live. God's irony in a certain way. But I digress. It's game over. And in this day and age, when the Messiah is knocking on the door, it's either you're going to be with the Jewish people, whether a Jew or not, and you want to attach yourself to God, or you're going to disappear. You want to be a fossil, which many are, it could be 90% of the Jewish people are going to disappear before the Messiah comes. I'm going to make another non-politically correct statement. And that is, if you're not Orthodox, and we got our own problems, you don't have a prayer. Your spiritual line is finished. Statistically speaking, that's the way it is. Either you hold according to the Torah or you believe in fantasy. You want fantasy, you'll disappear spiritually. Certain places, 85 to 90% intermarriage, otherwise 70 to 75%, you will disappear. And you say, okay, so we'll disappear. That's the price you'll pay. Some people will say it's worth the price. So what if we'll disappear? So what if there are no more Jews? Right? There are a lot of people that think that. Okay, so disappear. No. Not the end of the world. It was a good try. We were around for a few thousand years. Okay? There are other people who will say, listen, they're doing the best they can. It's not easy. You got one spouse that isn't Jewish. You got baseball practice. You got this. You got that. I'm not interested in excuses. Either you're the real deal or you're not. If you're not, leave your Hebrew name at the door because it's going to be gone. Because the only time you are going to use that Hebrew name is either when you're born, when you have a bar bat mitzvah, when you get married, and when you die. That'll be about the extent of your Judaism. So they go, oh, big deal. So I'll go to this game, I'll watch this thing, I'll do this other thing. I'll let these negative influences, have whatever effect. They won't affect me. Of course they will. They just break down your will to be lazy. I mean, I can't imagine a person gets upstairs, says, God, listen, I tried. I did my best. Look at the circumstances. Maybe God will say yes. Maybe he'll say no. Hopefully he won't say no, but I could imagine. Now, if I were God, which wouldn't be good. If I were God, I'd get up from my throne and say, you lived your life. Look at all the non-kosher food you ate. Look at how much you didn't keep Shabbos. You didn't keep the festivals properly. And you were lazy and all these different things. What you could have done to be close to me, to do what I wanted you to do through my book that I gave to Moshe to pass down, called the Torah. And then God says, but you always strove for mediocrity. You don't want to hear that. Being mediocre, being happy where I'm holding, you might as well be dead. You're just lacking burial. On that note, I also give a class, Intro to Kabbalah. We're covering how providence works every Tuesday night, 9 o'clock, New York time. I also give classes online. People want to convert to Judaism or don't want to convert to be a Noahide. Take a look at my Facebook fan page, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, or my blog, orthodoxconversion.com. Anyone wants to contact me can send me an email at rabbichaimcoffman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com. Everyone have a great Shabbos.